So first, thanks to Manuel for the presentation, for the start. So I'm here to talk to you guys about UXIDevOps or UX pipe DevOps. Depends on the person, depends on how you want to read it. But first, my name is Domingos. I'm the lead infrastructure engineer at Farfetch for all things CI/CD, and that's by day. By night, I normally am making games with some colleagues to try to improve that area as well in Portugal. So, what is UXIDevOps, right? Because messing with the word DevOps is cool. As we saw, like we can do DevOps, I don't remember, DevSecOps, etc. So we can put everything in between DevOps and it will work. Obviously it's the mix between UX, DevOps, and UX, Dev, and Ops. I normally put the I because of the UI part, which is also important. But I normally want to do things by definition, and what is better to define things than Wikipedia, which is always right. So we all know what DevOps is, otherwise we wouldn't be here, so I can skip that part. User experience, well, it depends on who you ask, and it depends on how much time that person has been working on UX, basically. But I will summarize it in the art of, yes, an art in the middle of engineering, the art of making software and its usage understandable and painless for your user, so the experience of using your software. Not to be mixed with UI, which is, well, the user interface, which we all know and love, unless you are from the back end, in which case you don't like those guys. And well, agile software development, which we all know to some extent, either because we wanted to try it or because our manager wanted us to try it. Be it pure agile or Scrum, etc. We are kind of familiarized with this approach, which is centered or focused in delivering faster and with very centered on feedback, right? So we can say that this is a symbiotic relationship. So you need DevOps to deliver software faster. You need agile methodologies to also deliver software faster. But UX is kind of the handbrake, right? Is what you need to make it better, not so much like delivering it, like just giving it away. So I normally like to use the example of Tetris because everyone knows how to play Tetris. I don't think I don't have to explain it. And the fun part is no one ever had to explain it to you, right? Or maybe yes, when someone passes you the machine. But the thing is that you look at this and you will lose the first couple of times, but you will understand how it works without instructions, without tutorials, without pop-ups, without read the documentation, or without, I don't know, an entire sandcastle generated file. So this is, to me, this is like the guide that we can use to develop software. And when I say software, I also include internal tools, right? Because DevOps and more if you work in the CI/CD part of the helping with DevOps in the company, normally are very internal focused. So normally is, as we normally say, for the ones that it's never the best for the ones that in-house, and that happens in your house as well. When visits come, you put the nice plates on. When you are eating, you just pick a platter or you just use a napkin or something. So the same principle applies. When you are in doubt about how to proceed with the practices of, well, UX, think about your favorite game. It doesn't matter if it is a mobile game, a Windows game, a console game, it doesn't matter. Because that's the thing, games are the kind of software that you are not obliged to use, because you kind of have to use the software to do the pipeline in your company. You need the spreadsheets to do your math. You need the software that you use on a daily basis, but games, no one is making you play them. You just play them because you want, and you just keep playing them because you are liking it. So it's a software that is purely based on UX. It has to be good, it has to be understandable, it has to be something that you like. Even if you don't like killing space marines or something, it has to be a pleasure to play with. So we have two types of solutions for this. I normally say that we have the takeaway type, which is in this case, this is the interface for DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean, like most of you guys for sure know Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. DigitalOcean is more of a smaller cloud provider that has its whole focus on smaller clients. So now their approach is more on persons that want to have a container with, well, they don't even know that it's a container, but they want to have a WordPress installation or a forum installation or something. So they have everything automated as much as possible. They have a very good DevOps team, so that you just click and you have it. And this is the backend. And you have the CPU usage, the memory, the disk I/O, etc. And these are all things that we are used to work with. But for a person that just wants to have a WordPress blog, this is very useful and very easy to understand. On the other end, we have tools like Jenkins, right? Everyone knows and loves Jenkins, and who doesn't is lying. But even though we love Jenkins, the people that have to administrate Jenkins love Jenkins. Some of the end users for Jenkins don't tend to like Jenkins because the interface was kind of ugly. And I love Jenkins, but you know, problems, first world problems. So even they had to update it and pass it to the so-called Blue Ocean interface, where everything is easier to get. You have little balls for the states. You click on them, the error is highlighted. You know, everything is simplified. Which you might think, why do I need to simplify something for software engineers? But everything that you can simplify, you just do it. Well, that's the basis of business for Apple. So, and we are here. So the other types of solutions are the dogfooding ones, the ones that we develop in the company. And for this, I will use our example. At Farfetch, we have over 2,000 or almost 2,000 developers, right? And they are distributed all across the globe. And as a company that grew very fast, very quickly, and in various ways, things exploded in every sense of the word. So you needed to, you can imagine what happens in those kinds of situations. So what we normally say when we started with this campaign of changing the internal workings of the pipeline and stuff, we normally tend to say, do you believe in magic? This is cringy AF, I know, but it will work in the end. Basically, this to some extent is what our tech stack used to be, and we are missing like 50% maybe. So every technology known to man was being used in the company, and you can tell that we have things like TFS, GitLab, TeamCity, and Jenkins, and Octopus Deploy, and those four tools to some extent do builds, and you can even, well, no, you can do releases with the five of them. So, and you know, every database known to man, Cassandra, Mongo, etc. So with everything being used at the same time, but all sorts of teams across the globe, you need something to, you need some way of controlling. And the best way of controlling, according to Tolkien, is one ring to rule them all and bind them in darkness, which always works. So we needed to create a solution to like focus our efforts. So for that, we focus on the fact that we are working for coders, like almost 2,000 engineers. What do engineers or coders like? Well, they like to code, or so I assume. So the best way of doing an interface for someone that likes to code and loves Git and loves to be in Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or Xcode or whatever the hell you use to program is, well, programming. So we created three parts for this. The blueprint file, the ffbuild file, and the ffencrypted file. I know that the namings were a lot more original at the beginning, and then we kind of gave up. But basically, these are the three parts that we use for our structure to define the whole process of every service across the company. And this will sound obvious, but like every design process that you introduce, once you explain it, it's like, ah, that's obvious. But once you get there, or you convince people that they need it, that's the difficult part. So blueprints are the contract for the service, everything that is like the image of the service, what is needed, the infrastructure for it. ffbuild is all the compilations files that they need, all the compilation steps that they need for their solution, and ffencrypted is all the configuration files for their application on all the settings. I will enter in more detail, but kind of quickly, so that I don't burn too much time. So basically, the blueprint concept is something like this. It's a basic YAML file, right? But when you define a service, you respect very simple rules, like platform boundary name. And platform boundary name is a very simple, basic rule, but it changed our lives because, as you might expect, too many teams, too many services, like we have new services every week. So there was no clear hierarchy, no clear path naming conventions. So everything now has a name and a surname. So platform, boundary, name. And every service has to have these 3 parts, which again sounds obvious, but it improved our quality of life a lot. And then you have all the other like fields that you have to put in. This is the team that puts it in, and the file, the blueprint files, the blueprint repository is managed by the infrastructure team, which is my team. So we have a like kind of transversal control of it. And in the case of maintainers, this is like the field I want to focus the most here, because the others you kind of infer them. You put the people that is going to be responsible for that service, or that machine for that matter, and that will be the basis for notifications, permissions, access, all kinds of things that are related to that service or machine is as code. And everyone that messed up with that permission is registered as code, because it's on Git, and we love Git. Also, the dependencies are there, which implies that we can do a dependency map very quickly. And well, you can put everything, like telemetry. This is basically, you know, the definition of the service. And then from the environment-specific part down is where the thing goes more like between infrastructure and engineering, because we get to define requirements, specifications, because, you know, an engineer can ask for 32 gigs of RAM. It doesn't mean that we will give them, but it's a nice thing that they will ask for it, and it's registered on Git that they asked for it. So they will put here as many environments as they want to release their build on, like development, West Europe, North Europe, China, etc. And also the credentials, which are in plain text, but are encrypted. And the only thing that can encrypt and decrypt credentials is the pipeline itself. So not even ourselves have access to the, I mean, we can, but again, it's registered whoever enters the machine, so is secured. The FF build is pretty simple. This is on the team's repositories for the solution. It's also a YAML file, because YAML. And they just put every configuration, every command that they have, that they need, in this file, and it should work. This is our solution to the "it works on my machine" drama, which we all know and love when someone comes and says, well, it works on my machine. This is the kind of solution for that. If it works on your machine, copy the commands, and it should work. If it doesn't work, it's because we are not supporting a technology, like maybe you're using, I don't know, .NET Core 2.2, and we're only in .NET Core 2.1 in the system. But other than that, it should work. And since this is in a repository basis, if you have a branch, every branch compiles differently. So for coders, it's easier to copy the code instead of filling boxes on TeamCity or anything like that. This brings us to the standards. So everything across this new infrastructure paradigm is using SaltStack as the basis for it. So everything is managed by SaltStack, which is, for the ones that are not familiar with it, it's like the newcomer to Chef, Puppet, and Ansible to some extent, but Chef and Puppet, right? And 100% Python based. And a lot of services created by us, which again, you have to take into consideration that this is because we needed to have this sort of control, because most of our team are like 40 people, infrastructure as a whole, and we are divided into, you know, performance, database, services, monitoring, and pipelines and test environments, which is yours truly, and networking. God forbid me that I forgot about networking. So we needed to have like a cross-domain control in code, as code. So everything here is as code, because we got geeky. And this core principle has to be respected, which is everything that we have in this new infrastructure, be it a container or a virtual machine, has to do whatever it's supposed to do and then be recycled. So no attachment to machines, no attachment to processes, no attachment to anything. We stop having pets and start treating everything as cattle, which is the future. And we also enforce some guidelines that may seem obvious, but when you enforce things work for the better, which is a very complicated statement. So everything that is on a branch will run in dev up to deploy, right? Up to test in dev, and it will die there. Everything that is on master will go all the way through, you know, publish in all the geographies that you put in your blueprint. So this way, the situation is that we are 40, we can be 50, we can be 1,000, but there will always be more engineers than there are infrastructure guys, because normal proportions of a company. So what happens is that our main focus is that if for some reason the team that is responsible for service X is in an offsite and dies in a bus ride, it can happen, the infrastructure team has to be able to pick the service code and deploy it without any issues. So master has to always be green, which again seems obvious, but these sort of things need to be enforced. And this is what a normal pipeline looks like. So check out, build, unit test, pack, publish, deploy to dev, test security, and then it will die there if it is a branch, and then publish and deploy in all the other data centers. It can also be done in parallel, but some teams don't like parallelism because opinions. And this is the other file that was missing, the FF encrypted. So this is basically the application configuration files. In the case of .NET, it will be appsettings.json, right? But you put the extension .environment.ff encrypted. If you only have one for all of them, you only use one. But if you want to have different configurations per environment, you have, well, different files in your repository, and the pipeline will just use the one that you wanted to put for that environment. This sounds like unnecessary, but if for some reason you want to have different log settings or different application configuration settings for a different environment, you can do it. And again, the credentials are put as variables, and we decrypt them, basically using this logic, which is used in Vault. So they basically put the same naming convention for everything, and it will decrypt them. This, again, sounds obvious, but consistency is one of the keys of a good user experience, because if something with this naming convention worked here, it should work there, right? And if it works, people feel smarter, even if they don't read the documentation, because that's a battle, read the documentation. But if something works like this in one place, and they use the same logic and it works, then they feel smart, and the process is smart, because, well, it fits. Secondly, is that we can have all the things in the world, but if when they deploy, they don't know what the hell is happening, they won't be happy. So this is part of the peace of mind that they need when they are working. So basically for this, we use many tools, but these two are like the bread and butter of the whole process. So the top down is Prometheus, some of you may know it, and the one on top is Sentinel, which basically shows the packages flowing between services and shows if a service is not healthy at the same time. We also have the whole Elk stack on top of it. And you may think, this is kind of overkill, maybe not, and this is kind of obvious, again, but if they use the pipeline, it deploys, and everyone is happy because it's green, but they don't know what the hell is the service doing, then everyone's life will be worse because they don't know how to debug it, because you don't want them to have access to the live infrastructure. Well, maybe you want, but the thing is that the less people interfere with production environment, the better. And since we have a bunch of teams and a bunch of technologies, this has to work the same way across all technologies. So that's the same logic across all systems. However, this has a trick. This doesn't mean Mac OS, this means iOS, because God knows that you can put Mac OS on a cloud environment unless you use Mac Stadium, and that's a whole other discussion. So we basically pass from this, which you remember, and there is some things missing, to this, right? And now this is the whole stack that we use. Everything you see on black is in-house code, right? So Kubernetes clusters for everything we build and deploy. And every container and machine in this whole infrastructure has SaltStack and Prometheus agents on it. So everything can be controlled and can be monitored in real time. So this for us is peace of mind, which is UX for the infrastructure team. Cool. And all the things that you see here are in-house code that we developed so that this works. So the setup services, build services, and testing services work with these technologies, which are right now the technologies that the company supports: Node.js, Java, .NET Core, and Python. And then we use Jenkins as the UI. And this is important because we love Jenkins, and developers seem to like Jenkins, but if for some reason they don't like Jenkins and they prefer to go, I don't know, to Travis or to Go or to something, we can change it, because Jenkins is a UI layer, because most of the code is happening on our side, and this is just like showing the process. Then you see we have credential services that work together with Vault, data services that work with all databases known to man, security services that work with Checkmarx, Blackduck, and SonarQube, which is missing, because that's so good. People love code smells until up to the moment that they get the results, and the pipeline starts to get red, then they don't like code smells. And network configuration services, which we rely on Console to work with our code on that, and the app configuration services, which is all the things that manage the files there. So that their focus should be basically develop, commit, and enjoy. We don't want them to think about the pipeline, or this is working, this is not working. We don't want them to care about this. And it works automatically, which is a term that we coined there that was originally being used as a pun, and then it started becoming a thing. It works automatically. So quick things for UX in your DevOps. You need to search for user behaviors, user research, and the usability, and then iterate on it. Iterate, which sounds obvious, but in our case, we are working with developers, they like code, so we do it as code. And, well, they like it. If we're working for, I don't know, other type of users that don't know how to code at all, well, maybe we'll ask some permission to steal some UI developers from another team and have a better, prettier UI with boxes and stuff, because that will work with the users. And then you just basically like sit with them and try to analyze what is working, what is not working. But then you have to be aware of the kinds of feedback, because sometimes some users love everything, some users hate everything. You have to like mix opinions, because you can just like be good with the last one that you heard. And you have to take into consideration that people normally don't tell you things to your face, and people don't want to fill forms either. So the best thing you can do is to like befriend the more people you can befriend from different teams, and then have them work as your spy basically. And then you ask like, is your team liking this? And he will like, they kind of like it. Because if you go to the team and say like, do you guys like it? They say, well, yeah, we're loving this. And the moment you turn your back, there's this mofo, man. I don't like this at all. This is not working. And they think this is working. So when you have the spies in there, which are the guys that go to the coffee with them and they like, say that this works, this doesn't work, and that guy can give you, good feedback, that's the best thing you can do. So the big questions are these: who are we building for? And who is the end user of our tool, which is what I said, right? Developers, so we did code. What are they trying to achieve? So they just want to deploy. So that's why we made it as straightforward as possible. Once you commit on Git, it doesn't matter. The level of knowledge, in this case, again, programmers, so they know how to code. If there were different people, we need to adjust to their needs. The improved adoption part is what I told. So normally what happens is that if the team that does the tool is part of the company, it will just like shove it down their throats, because it's a tool that the company uses, so you have to bear with it. But people won't like to work with it and won't be happy with it, so you have to try for them to like it, so that they use it and they give you feedback. The moment that you get your users to commit to your repository with like improvements, you are there, because it means that they care at least, even if the commit is passive aggressive, which tends to happen. And again, if we are building for them or for us, because that's tricky, because if you are a CI/CD guy, you obviously know the end-to-end of the thing. So this works like this works like that. You need to think that the developers don't really care if this is working on an Azure machine, on an AWS machine, in a Google Cloud machine. They don't care. So you need to like hide that information as much as possible for them, because they don't care. If they want to see, they have a Kibana with logs for that. But always focus on the users. And then we have the cultural problem, which is get stuff done. Because as you all know, we have to deliver. And if it is internal tools, it's worse, because you have to deliver. Like the other team is depending on you. You have to put it to work. And for that, we have things like the Agile framework, which I won't touch too much, because there is a talk much better than mine that will talk about this. But what we can do is that we can put them together with UX and basically improve the process, so that we have the same cycle of releasing, deploying, taking feedback, etc., but with the research, hypothesis, and prototyping part, which takes some time, but we need to drive the change. So for that, we need to get the management to buy in on this. That's the most difficult part, but once you do that, everything is downhill, because once your boss understands that you may take an extra sprint to do this, but once you do it, it will work, you are there. But selling that is a hard sell, because an extra sprint or two maybe to just do this right is a difficult sell. Depends on your manager. But once that is done, well, you have to take always the user experience in mind. For example, in our process, users wanted a canary deployment or a rollback of the previous deployment. So they wanted a box or something, like they have an octopus deploy, right? But we can't give them that, because the interface doesn't work like that anymore. But you have to do it fluently. But now they use everything as code. So how do you put that button for something that is being done everything as code? Answer is, well, you put a button. you can run past that. But the thing is that it should be like as easy as possible. You just select rollback. It will give you the 5 previous versions of deployment in the interface of the deployment, like of the pipeline. You just pick the version that you want, and it will run the deploy again and correct itself. It's all about collaboration. So again, you have to get that feedback, work that feedback. Drive a smart prioritization. It's important that it looks pretty and it works well, but if the company is depending on, I don't know, canary deployments and you need to do them, well, the interface maybe can wait a sprint and you then iterate on that, but you need to never forget that you need to put that nice, otherwise people won't use it or will complain every time they use it. Designers need visibility into the product. If you have a designer, if you are like the same team, you just know your stuff. UX has to participate on every stage and you have to stick to the basics of it. So again, if the team is the very own that is developing the UX, it's kind of easier. If not, and incorporate feedback quickly, which is why we tie in Agile here, which is sometimes you get the feedback, you correct it. Again, we get back to the not all feedback is good feedback. Sometimes people will say like, I would like that the Dropbox is green. Why? Because I like green. Well, you can do that, but I'm certain that most of your users really don't care, but if they see the white box turning into green, they will care. So take that into consideration. And now, very quickly, flash round, okay, so we can finish this. Basically, visual monitoring. I already talked about this. The more visibility you give to your users, the better. The more that your users know about what is happening, in this case for CI/CD on production, the better. Both for you, the team, and your customers, and even the managers, because one thing that we learn with time is that managers love graphs. So the more visually impacting this is, the better. Next, gamification. So we don't talk about gamification. There are a bunch of talks about gamification. There are a lot of theories about gamification, and people mostly tend to think that gamification is putting achievements into builds, for example. You can do that. It doesn't mean that is the solution. What we tend to do, you need to think smart solutions according to your audience, right? One quick example that we have is that people spend too much on infrastructure because they don't care, it's not their problem. So what you do is you put a leaderboard of people that is spending less on infrastructure, and people start to, well, get icky about that and start to try to beat each other. What happens is that you can accelerate the process and do the reverse, which is you do a dashboard of people that is spending too much on infrastructure, and then you do shameful gamification, which works even better because no one wants to be the top spender in the company. And then people start to come to you and like, oh, can we like cut on a few machines because my manager doesn't want us to be there. So that thing starts to happen. And even between your teams, like we had an issue with tickets. People don't like to do tickets because we have, the dev and the ops part, and the ops part is normally tickets on Jira. So we put a rank of top users closing tickets, and it worked because people start trying to beat each other on who closed the most tickets. Because if you don't close any tickets, you look like you're not doing any work. So it works. And if you can incentivize with a free lunch or something, the better. And finally, ChatOps, which we all even heard of it, maybe. So ChatOps is basically attaching our operations or commands into a chatbot or something like that, so that you can do things without like logging into machines or going to shell and that sort of thing. So there are many ways of doing this. What I found out is that you can put a bot and even make it available to your users, and they will use it. But the more human and fun you make it, even though you don't need to do it, the better. Because you, for example, we made in a previous life, we made a bot that had natural language, and the first, like, we programmed it to recognize natural language for asking the commands that it needed, instead of, do build. Like, I want to do a build, and it will be like, okay, what build do you want? That kind of thing. You have tools for that in both Azure and AWS, etc. So it's free to use it. But what we find that worked even better was doing natural language for insults. Because what's the first thing that people will do with a bot? Insult it. So when people start going to the bot and say, like, they ask a few commands and then they try things like, you're stupid. And then when the bot answers, no, you are stupid, people start going like, wait, what? And the fun part is that the more things you program to react to that logic, the better. And your users can't complain about that, because I don't imagine any user coming to you saying like, I insulted your bot and it insulted me back. So it won't work like that. So again, the more imagination you put into simple things, the more people will use it and, well, work better. And you can actually channel them into doing things that you want, because the bot only does certain things. They don't know, but the bots only do certain things. They even guides them into doing things that they don't know that they want, but they probably want, or they want 10 gigs of RAM, and the bot will say like, you like 4, you want like 4, and that kind of thing. So to finish this up, I will say, and this is normally like what we use to orient ourselves in this process, if we're not building something that simplifies our users' experience with our systems, no matter how beautiful it is, we are not building a good service. And I think that this applies like to every software design, but when you work in some related way to DevOps, which is, well, mixing two areas that are very, delivery oriented, like giving things to the company or to people, the more you think about doing it well and doing it better so that they like have what they want or what they don't know that they want, which is a very Apple phrase, but bear with me, the better. And we will eventually all walk towards a world where the old Jenkins interface is a thing of the past, and coming to work and using Jenkins is again not a pain because you actually like the way it's put together. And that's it.
Any questions?
Good question. So thank you for the presentation. It's very nice to see how you guys have managed to deal with UX for developers, which is very good to see these kind of examples. I have a question. For example, when some internal team asks you guys for building some feature which is not yet automated, how do you manage your expectation, like your internal roadmaps for the DevOps team and these other teams' roadmap?
Okay, so the question is, repeating for the sake of, so the question is, how do we manage other teams' expectations in terms of their features or requirements that they want, and our roadmap, and how do we get them both together without affecting too much any of the two parts involved? So what I found about working for developers, being a DevOps team, is that using agile methodologies as a DevOps team. When I say as a DevOps team, you know that I am shortcutting here, because some companies say that they have a DevOps team when DevOps is kind of a philosophy, they all debate. So we are an infrastructure team, but we have. So in terms of how we manage the roadmap, so this is the difficult part. We have two parts of our work, which is the dev and the ops. The dev is the cool part, which is we have a roadmap, and we say, okay, so we have all these features, and this is all being requested. So we're going to do this. We promise this for this quarter, and we publish that. We say quarter 2, this is going to be open, and we publish it in a public billboard for the for developers, saying this is quarter 2 objectives. There you go. And then we manage it internally in terms of sprints, and we release them as we work. Our promise is normally that everything that you see in that quarter will be released by the end of the quarter, but we can release them earlier, and it's the focus, because agile. And there is that. However, because we have a lot of emergency things that normally happen because ops, we normally need to have some room for that, and that takes into consideration when and how they ask for things. For example, if they ask for a feature that is a nice to have, for example, I would like to have a blue-green deployment, for example. We already have canary and rollbacks and stuff, so it's nice to have only because you already have a lot of options. So we put that in the backlog, and we tell the team okay, so based in company's priorities and other things, this will very likely enter here, and that's published as well, this is here. And we have all the features that are either done or being requested are in a public, it's like a Stack Overflow, but for internal use. The platform that we use is Discourse, by the way, if someone wants to use it. So we have posts for features that people comment in there what they want and stuff, and we normally close the post when the feature is delivered, or we cancel the feature, etc. So everything is very democratic. And democratic because we decide what features go in the end, but based on business. But when it's something very urgent, for example, we automated SQL, Cassandra, and we are missing Mongo, and Mongo is getting traction inside the company, we may have to say that Mongo will be in Q2, which is now. but they kind of need it now. So we normally do a hack and put that into the operations part. It's like, no, this is maintenance, guys. So let's speed this up because the guys need this ASAP. But we tend to not do that much because there is also a process of, I have found out that there is also a process of training expectations because of the dev part of being DevOps. Because when the company culture was built around having ops guys, normally it's very request oriented. I need this, I need that, I want this, I want that, and you deliver on time. Like Jiraing, as we say, like ticketing. But when you actually have to develop a platform and do things and develop features and stuff, that gets weird. Normally the best shield we have is saying like, I will put that in the backlog, and they will say like, yeah, but what can we do that? Just say like, well, it's like your team. You also have things in the backlog. And they go like, oh, and they go away. So it's like, oh, actually, you are also working as developers. So we kind of tend to do that. The earlier a company starts with the guys that do infrastructure also have development flows, the better, because then it's very hard to like turn the entire company to these guys also have a life and they have to develop stuff as well, and that's difficult. But normally like do everything very public in that billboard that we have, and keep updating it, which doesn't save us from Slack, by the way, because it's Slack, people always talk things in Slack and you can go away from that.
Cool, thanks.
Really cool presentation, and I like when you talk about user experience part. Usually, when you're doing the UX process, right, you reach for your users and you kind of validate your assumptions. You come up with some prototypes, some mock-ups, and I was curious to see if you guys were also doing this. Were you reaching out for developers with some kind of prototyping, some kind of mocks for the kind of service that you like? Because this parallels seems interesting to go and show somebody. Would you like to try this thing? Can you tell a little bit more about the discovery phase of your?
Okay. So the question is that in the process of UXing the DevOps, we have any sort of prototyping, and how we approach teams, development teams, with that prototyping process and how it works overall. So it depends on the feature and the feature, because some easier features we kind of prototype them, in a billboard or in paper or something, and go to the team that requested it because it's a very localized thing, and go like this, and they're like, yeah, and then it's kind of a back and forth. They go like, maybe if you like do like this, or if the flow goes like this. So it's very like hand to hand, because it's easier because we're working with developers. It's different than what is a product owner's work, which is balancing both worlds, actual developers and customers. But normally for big features, what we do is that because there is a lot of people and a lot of expectations, so we focus very heavily on requirements, like, which again sounds obvious, but bear with me. Like, okay, so you want this, right? Like this is this, right? You like this is the thing you want, right? Like, and you try to like explain it and draw it as much as possible so that you don't have mess ups, because we had experiences in the past, and we're kind of living one right now, where we like said like, so this is blue, right? Blue, and we went building it blue, and when we came back and said like, okay, so we're ready for you guys to prototype it, to play with this, so it's blue. And the guys were like, I mean, I say blue, but I mean like petrol, more of a dark gray kind of color. And it's like, and so we kind of tried them to, and then when we have it, we do this prototype thing, which is we go to the the core users. We have two ways of doing this, either with the people that requested it or with the core users. The core users are that people that I talk about, which are the people that that they like your platform, which again, liking your platform is not like loving your platform, like fanboying over your platform. It's like people that understand what you're trying to do, but they will hit you if necessary. Like, dude, this is shitty. And you will like, okay, sorry, and correct it. So this is the best kind of feedback. We basically go to those persons, to those people, and go like this, and try it. And we normally do trials by team. So we organize with the the release management team and stuff, and say like, So you have teams to try, or the project management team, like you have teams to try this, please, and they like get 3, 2, 5, and they try, they give feedback, and if everything is okay, it rolls out. If it doesn't, we go back and draw it a little. The moment in which we release it depends on the feature, but since we are hammering a lot on the requirements part, normally when we prototype it, it's kind of done. The most fun part is that developers don't really care about the UX that much. It's like, okay, so now you press a button here, and it will go like this, and you have a Dropbox here, and they were like, those are not what I was asking. And it's like, yes, it deploys on Canary, and it's like, okay, cool. So depends on your profile, but then it's people that likes a button, and you have to put the button. But normally we like try to face it that way.
Nice, thank you.
Last question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.